Welcome to the channel, where real stories meet real emotions. Today's story will make you think twice about boundaries, entitlement, and standing your ground. But before we dive in, take a second to tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our community reaches. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss tomorrow's powerful news story. Trust us, it's one you'll want to see. Now, let's get into it. A simple gate exposed years of neighborhood entitlement. On a warm Saturday morning in a quiet Georgia suburb, Linda Thompson stood at the edge of a long, gravel driveway, her arms tightly crossed and her lips pursed with frustration. Dressed in a crisp blouse, khaki slacks, and walking shoes, she looked like someone who had everything under control. But today, something had clearly rattled her. For years, Linda had treated this driveway as if it were part of her daily routine. She strolled through it with her golden retriever each morning, pointed delivery drivers down the shortcut, and proudly told new neighbors that it was shared space under the HOA. She had never asked permission. She didn't feel the need to. No one had ever told her no. But now, things were different. In front of her stood a brand new steel security gate, locked tight. A large, unmistakable sign beside it read, "Private property, no trespassing." The bold red letters seemed to shout directly at her. Linda's face flushed with disbelief and anger. "Who does this guy think he is?" she muttered, pulling out her iPhone. Within seconds, she was dialing 911. "Yes, officer," she said, her voice sharp. "Someone has illegally blocked a public road with a gate. This needs to be taken down immediately." As she paced along the sidewalk, her heels clicking against the concrete, the fury in her voice grew. She couldn't believe someone would just block what she had always believed was part of the community. She had walked this path for years. Surely that had to count for something. But inside the home at the far end of the driveway, Derek Mitchell, a 38-year-old Navy veteran and new homeowner, watched everything unfold from his living room. With a calm breath, he sipped his coffee and glanced at the security feed on his tablet. He wasn't surprised. He had expected this from the moment he put up the gate. Entitlement had a funny way of showing itself, and today, it had a name: Linda Thompson. Derek had done everything by the book, bought the land legally, transferred ownership, and installed the gate to protect his property. Now it was time to see if the law would back him up when the police arrived. Moments later, the distant sound of sirens pierced the quiet morning air. A police cruiser slowly rolled up to the entrance of the driveway, its lights flashing but siren off. Linda practically sprinted toward the car, waving her arms like she was flagging down a rescue team. One of the officers barely had time to step out before she grabbed him by the sleeve. "Thank God you're here," she huffed. "This man put up a gate across a road we've all used for years. Now he's blocking community access. This has to be illegal." The officers exchanged a quick glance, their expressions neutral but slightly cautious. They were clearly used to calls like this. Neighbors at war, assumptions turning into accusations. Still, protocol was protocol. Meanwhile, Derek Mitchell stepped out of his front door, walking calmly toward the gate. He wore jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and the same calm expression he'd had all morning. His footsteps were steady, deliberate. He had nothing to hide, and he knew this moment was coming. "Sir," one officer began, stepping forward, "we received a complaint about an unauthorized gate blocking a public road. Do you have any documentation showing this is your property?" Derek didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled out a weatherproof folder he had prepared days ago, just in case. "Yes, officer," he said coolly, handing over the papers. "Here's the deed, updated with my name. I purchased the property legally last year. The previous owner never enforced any boundaries, but I do. This is private land, and there's nothing illegal about installing a gate to protect it." The officers flipped through the pages, scanning signatures and county records. After a long pause, one of them looked up and nodded. "Everything checks out," he said, handing the folder back. "This is indeed private property. You're not breaking any laws." Linda's jaw dropped. "That's impossible," she snapped. "This road has always been part of the neighborhood. Who sold it to him?" Derek gave a small chuckle. "The same guy who always owned it," he said. "You just assumed it was yours." As the realization sank in, Linda's face flushed red. Not with confusion, but with humiliation. And still, she wasn't ready to back down. Linda took a step back, her fists clenched at her sides, eyes darting between the officers and Derek. Her voice, now shrill with disbelief, broke the tension. But this isn't fair. We've all used this road for years. Everyone cuts through here. It's part of the neighborhood. The second officer sighed, clearly trying to stay patient. Ma'am, just because something has been used a certain way for a long time doesn't mean it's public. If the land was privately owned and the owner now chooses to restrict access, he's within his rights to do so. Linda's mouth opened, then closed. She was speechless for a moment. Derek leaned casually against the gate, arms crossed, watching her with quiet confidence. He had seen this coming from a mile away. If you wanted access, he said evenly, you should have bought the land when it was for sale. But you didn't. So now you need to respect my property. Linda's eyes narrowed. This isn't over, she hissed, pointing a finger at him. I'll talk to the HOA. I'll call the city. You can't just take away something the community has used forever. The officers looked unimpressed. One of them took a small step toward her. Ma'am, this isn't a community issue. It's a private matter, and it's already been resolved. The land is his. You're not allowed to trespass here anymore. Derek gave a polite nod. Appreciate you clearing that up, officers. Linda's shoulders stiffened, her pride clearly wounded. She wasn't used to being told no, especially not by someone she had never seen as part of her community. She spun on her heel and stormed off toward her SUV, muttering under her breath about legal action and neighbor meetings. The officers lingered a moment, thanked Derek for his cooperation, and returned to their cruiser. As they drove away, Derek stood alone by the gate, letting out a slow breath. He hadn't just installed a physical barrier, he had drawn a line in the sand. For too long, people like Linda felt entitled to what wasn't theirs. But today, the message was clear. This land had a new owner, and the old assumptions no longer applied. As Linda sped off down the street, tires crunching over gravel, Derek remained at the gate, unmoved. The morning sunlight cast a warm glow on his property, now peaceful again, but the tension still hung in the air. He took another sip from his coffee mug, the heat now gone, but the satisfaction fresh. He knew Linda wasn't done. People like her rarely walked away quietly, but he also knew he was ready. This land wasn't just a plot of earth with a long driveway. It was something he had worked hard for. It represented years of saving, sacrifice, and grit. Derek hadn't bought it to start drama. He bought it for peace, for space, for the right to decide who could step on it and who couldn't. Later that afternoon, as Derek trimmed the hedges near the front gate, a neighbor strolled by on the sidewalk, cautiously curious. It was Mr. Harris from down the street, older, more measured than Linda. He nodded politely. Hey, Derek, he said. Heard there was a bit of a situation this morning. Derek chuckled. You could say that. Linda's already sent out messages to the HOA board, Harris added. She's furious. I figured she would be, Derek replied, but she doesn't have a leg to stand on. Harris nodded. I looked it up myself. Deed's clear as day. It's your land. There was a pause between them. Then Harris said something Derek didn't expect. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. People just got too comfortable using something that was never theirs. Derek smiled. It wasn't validation he needed, but it was nice to hear. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Derek walked the length of his driveway, inspecting the new fence line. He had added signs at every 50 feet. Private property, no trespassing. He didn't want conflict, but he wasn't going to leave room for doubt. Inside, his phone buzzed with a new email, an official notice from the HOA acknowledging the incident and confirming that the road was, in fact, privately owned. Derek exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and finality in his chest. The boundary was clear now, legally and literally. He had drawn the line, and this time it was going to stay that way. Over the next few days, word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some whispered, some gossiped, and a few even drove by slowly, just to get a glimpse of the now famous gate at the end of Derek Mitchell's driveway. But Derek didn't flinch. He kept mowing his lawn, waving politely at the curious, and living his life the way he had always intended, on his own terms. Linda, on the other hand, wasn't ready to let it go. She had sent multiple emails to the HOA board, started a group chat with like-minded neighbors, and even threatened to contact a local news station. But the more noise she made, the more isolated she became. The HOA had already confirmed the truth. The land was private. The gate was legal. The road had never belonged to the community. There was nothing left to argue. Still, entitlement has a way of digging in its heels. A few days later, Derek caught Linda pacing near the gate again. She wasn't yelling this time, just standing there, arms folded, eyes burning holes into the sign that clearly read, "No trespassing, private drive." Derek didn't approach her. He didn't need to. She knew now. Everyone did. Her time of strolling freely across someone else's land, giving orders like she owned the place, that era was over. That night, Derek stood on his porch with a glass of iced tea, watching the stars peek out above the trees. For the first time since moving in, the air felt still, peaceful. Not just because the gate was locked, but because the boundary had been respected. Finally. He thought about everything that had happened, the entitlement, the confrontation, the humiliation. But in the end, it all came down to something simple: respect. Something he was willing to give, but only when it was mutual. He took one last look at the gate before heading inside. The signs were clear. The lines had been drawn. The message had been delivered. And from now on, anyone who wanted to cross that line would have to think twice. Because this time, the land had an owner who wasn't afraid to protect what was his. What would you have done if you were in Derek's shoes? Or maybe you've dealt with someone like Linda before, someone who crosses boundaries and feels entitled to what doesn't belong to them. We want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Derek handled the situation the right way? Was putting up the gate the best solution, or would you have approached it differently? Share your opinion in the comments below. Your perspective might just open someone's eyes or help others going through similar situations. And tell us, where are you watching from? We love seeing people from all over the country and the world connect through these real-life stories. This channel is about more than storytelling. It's about starting conversations, recognizing truth, and standing up for what's right. So don't be shy. Drop a comment, join the discussion, and let your voice be part of this community. If you've ever had to draw a line and defend it, we want to hear your experience. Let's talk about respect, ownership, and what it really means to take a stand.